In a country that has such profound respect for private property, images like these should be an aberration. But in Maryland, this is a common sight, a family's clothes, toys, and furniture dumped in the street after they've been evicted. More than 500,000 families are sued by their landlords for eviction every year in Maryland, a rate much higher than that of other states. 17,000 of those families end up with their belongings on the street.
Why would they have things set out for other people to go through your belongings and you have to start all over in life? It's the worst thing I think that could happen to a person, knowing that you can't go back and pick your things up and get them.
These unattended piles of property represent an eviction system gone awry.
It's pretty obvious from looking at the piles of trash in the street that this is not the best way to do things. And in fact, other states, other cities, and even parts of Maryland don't do it this way. What we need in Maryland is a uniform law that fairly allocates the burdens and costs of dealing with evictions so that we don't have to deal with this problem.
When a judge decides to evict a tenant, the tenant is informed, but is not told when the eviction will occur. Even though the eviction date is scheduled well in advance, no Maryland law or local law requires the court or the landlord to tell a family when to expect a sheriff's deputy at their door.
I'd say about a month ago on the other side of the street, the guy knew he was going to be evicted, but he didn't know the exact time. And then the bad thing about it was he was at his father's funeral the day they did it.
They don't have to inform you the date of eviction. They don't mail you anything. I have a phone. They don't call you.
And when the eviction does happen, the landlord dumps the family's property in the street. The family may be trying to move their belongings, but in the meantime it's picked through by scavengers and rodents and scattered by the wind and rain. After a few days, a public works truck arrives and hauls what's left to the dump at taxpayers' expense. It's not just tenants who are harmed by this process. Neighborhoods are as well.
It's the rare week when I drive to work and I don't see somewhere along the way somebody has been evicted and all their belongings have just been dumped out on the street. And it's depressing. I mean, I work in community development, and it's one more force constantly working against community development.
It's very upsetting to see it. I mean, I hate people to come here because of it looking like that.
When real estate agents are trying to sell people a house, there's nothing like trying to show somebody a new house that they're anxious to move into, and then half a block down the street, all of somebody's possessions are just piled on the sidewalk and in the road.
It doesn't have to be this way. Solutions are being proposed by advocacy groups like the Maryland Rental Housing Coalition.
There are three basic elements that should be addressed. First of all, it's the sheriff and the landlord who schedule the eviction. They know when the eviction is going to occur, but nobody is required by law to tell the tenant. The tenant should be provided notice at the same time the eviction is scheduled. Secondly, the tenant should be given an opportunity to reclaim their goods for a certain amount of time after the eviction. In New York and Philadelphia, for instance, a landlord is required to hold the goods for up to 30 days. Only if the tenant doesn't reclaim the goods should the landlord or the warehouseman then take the goods to the public dump, but not put them on the street. I mean, that's the obvious thing, is the goods should not be on the street. The tenant should have notice of when the eviction is going to happen, and the tenant should have a right to reclaim the goods. If we had those three things in Maryland law, we would have a uniform and fairly balanced law that would deal with everybody's interests.